Is your company moving applications into public cloud? Well, now you have problems, as your on-premises security products don't work for public cloud, traditional security assessments don't give you the real picture, and the biggest security threat is now misconfiguration of your cloud workloads. CloudNeedy offers you a cloud-native approach to manage security, data privacy, and compliance. With CloudNeedy, you gain instant visibility into your security posture and the ability to continuously monitor and remediate any deviations. Take a free test drive of CloudNeedy's continuous cloud assurance platform by visiting cloudneedy.com/securityweekly. That's cloud, N-E-E-T-I. The modern attack surface is vast and permeable, extending from the data center to the cloud and device edge. Security teams are stretched thinner and thinner as they try to cover this ground. The result? More high-profile breaches hit the news every day. Don't let your organization be next. ExtraHop delivers security from the inside out, helping enterprise security teams detect threats up to 95% faster and cut staff time to resolve by 2/3 or more. Act with confidence. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly. Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies. Protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week, Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us April 1st through the 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort for InfoSec World 2019. Lots of great presentations. Many of the presenters being interviewed on this show and others on the network. You can visit infosecworld.misty.com. Use the discount code OS19-SecWeek for 15% off the main conference or a world pass. And for this conference too, if you're interested in booking an interview or briefing with Security Weekly, go to the same website, securityweekly.com/conference request, and submit your request to us today, and we'll get those scheduled. All righty. So I wanted to spend a little time talking about some of the projects I've been working on this month. And as we came into the new year, those of you that have been following the show know I'm taking on more of a CTO role and involved more with the technology. And in order for me to manage all of the projects that are security related, that are dealing with the segments on the shows, that are internal operations for Security Weekly, I needed to put together some stuff to help us keep organized. And I think these are very valuable things for security teams to have and use in your organizations. I also created a budget of myself for like $0 to do all of this stuff. Now, obviously that requires a lot more time and resources. However, to be quite honest, I was just really tired of every time I would find a solution that I was getting nickel and dime to death, that I could sign up for a free account. But then if I wanted this feature, well, now it's $5 per user per month. But then if I wanted another feature, it was $10 per user per month. And then if I wanted more features, well, that was the enterprise plan. And when you look into it, it can be hundreds of dollars per user per month, depending on which solution. So I was just really tired of the subscription models that are nickeling and diming us to death, and sought out free and commercial collaboration tools that I think are really good for security teams and hopefully going to be really good for us. I'm not saying that I will not throw out some of these tools if they stop meeting our requirements. But what I found so far has been pretty good. So the first is project planning. And I've gone through multiple iterations of project planning tools. What was it? We're using it Tenable way back in the day. Smart Sheets comes up in some of my searches. I wasn't a big fan of Smart Sheets. Way back in the day, it was Microsoft Project, right? Before SaaS solutions started really becoming popular, right? It was Microsoft Project. Jeff, I don't know what you've used in the past for project management tools. It's all over the map.
I use paper and a pen and
a whiteboard.
A whiteboard is a great tool.
Yep.
In fact, I'd be tempted to call it a solution.
It's true. I mean, if you read the Phoenix Project, they manage the project with note cards and whiteboards.
Well, and we all know I'm a curmudgeon and kind of grumbly and old school, but uh, everybody's always coming out with these new tools and these new programs, and um, you know, it's not that I'm an old dog and can't learn new tricks, but if I've got something that works for me, I kind of like to stick with it. Whether it's a project management tool or my email interface, whatever it is, don't change it. I'd still be on Windows 95 if it were up to me because I liked the desktop, but that's just me. But to be more objective, my problem with tools like this, especially open source, is, and the ones we try to use at Tenable, I'm somewhat familiar with those as you are. It's the And maybe it's just in my head, I look at these tools and I kind of like, okay, it doesn't do what I want it to do the way I want to do it, but I can kind of see what somebody's logic was when they were putting it together, what they thought was right. So very quickly it becomes clear that it was written with somebody else's perspective and viewpoint, and not necessarily my perspective, viewpoint, rationale approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it might do the thing you want, but it's not doing it the way I'm used to doing it. And damn it, I don't want to do it a different way. I'd throw it out and go on to something else.
Well, I think it's an important point, Jeff, that your tools or solutions, I'll use solutions air quotes, shouldn't dictate how you want to do things and shouldn't dictate your process. You must develop your process first and then go find something that, as close as possible, allows you to implement your process, and that's largely what I've done here. And some of the open source is a double-edged sword, right? Tomorrow, the first one I'm going to talk about, OrangeScrum, right? Could have a new release that changes everything that maybe doesn't match my process, right?
Right.
But you hope on the positive side of open source that you can maintain that flexibility and customize it to match your process more so than you can with a commercial or cloud-based solution where you don't have as much flexibility and control. So it's all a trade-off.
Well, and you said tomorrow they could change things. It begs the question, how much of a consideration is it when you're picking any tool, whether it's freeware, open source, or a paid tool? If and when things change, it doesn't satisfy your needs anymore. Is there a way to prepare for, and I'm not even sure what the right term is, portability, transfer, all the work that you've put into it? Is there a way to pull it out, and do you need an API in order to feed it into the next tool that you try to use?
Sure. Yeah, and I think for these collaboration tools, for me, it's pretty easy to swap them out. Right. Okay. If we need to change, we need to change. Where I think you run into the situation with open source is I've developed a commercial solution and I've got 1,000 customers using it. And now one of the open source libraries or frameworks or code that I've incorporated is changing. Do I now just fork it and become the maintainer of this new version that meets my needs? When you're a software development company, I can totally see that happening. And that's one way. And what we've talked about on shows like Application Security Weekly is getting ahead of that curve, right? Knowing that you're using this software library and doing some threat modeling, not even really for security. I mean, it could be, but even if you put security aside, do the threat model and say, what if this changes and it doesn't meet our needs anymore? What's our plan to continue maintaining it or to have other options that we go to? And staying ahead of that is part of the game. I think very much I'm going to do the same with the solution. So, the first one here, I chose OrangeScrum for my project planning. Now, largely because when I evaluated all of the different project management tools that I've used in the past and newer ones, I didn't see too many differences, Jeff, in functionality, right? So I went with the one that was the cheapest. OrangeScrum is one of the few now. It's getting harder and harder to find open source tools that you can actually download all of the source code and go and install it on your own server, right? Because for me, that's way cheaper than $10 per user per month reoccurring cost, where I now can get it. I stand up a server in the cloud that, yes, has $10 per month. However, I put 2 applications. I have unlimited users, and I'm only paying $10 a month. I take snapshots in the cloud. For us, for a smaller shop, that's a good solution. Larger shops, to communicate in your team, you may find that's a good solution too.
Yeah, the philosophical question that comes to my mind is free always cheaper?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. In certain cases,
I agree.
right? Yeah. It is true. It is going to take my time and the team's time to maintain this, to keep up with updates. So there is an ongoing cost, which in this particular case, I believe is a lot less.
Gotcha.
Because as I said,
that's an important consideration. I think
very important.
Is what we're both trying to say is it's not the initial cost. It's the cost to set it up, and it might just be man hours. It might be your personal time, and you don't have any other choice anyway, so you're going to do it. But especially in terms of scaling up, most organizations that want to use this probably want to grow, and so scalability and the cost of ownership. Even though the initial cost is free, the length of time it takes to do maintain it yourself, train everybody on it. At some point that adds up materially. It may not in the beginning, but at some point, especially if you're growing, free is no longer cheaper.
Yeah, I think there is a point of diminishing returns. However, for us, I was seeing that in the reverse, that as we adopted a SaaS solution, and we do use SaaS solutions for some things, but as we adopted them for other things, it got more expensive, right, as we grew than it would for us to host it ourselves.
Well, I think that's one of the greatest maybe lie is too strong a term, but the perception that managed solutions, cloud solutions, take it out of my hands and let somebody else deal with its solutions are cheaper. I think more often than not, like as you were describing earlier, all the hidden costs, all the add-on costs add up. All I ever tell my customers when they're considering these quote unquote, this is so much cheaper because it's going to be managed by somebody else. It's somebody else's responsibility. To tie into a security theme. Maybe you've shifted responsibility for the security. Maybe you haven't, but more importantly, have you shifted the liability, or is the third party that's taking on whatever for you, are they assuming the liability? More often than not, if you read the small print, they're saying, no, we're doing exactly what we said we're doing for you. Don't imply anything. And not to pick on AWS, but as a good example, we were looking at AWS when I was at Tenable, and because we were partnered with them, I got to see some of their, I got to see their ROC, and I'm thinking whether I'm violating NDA at this point. Let's just say that, if you go to the AWS website and you think I'm going to put something out on the cloud and it's going to be hosted and they're going to take care of everything security wise for me, that's not an automatic, that's an add-on. But I think that very often, a lot of these vendors will say, or they won't say, but they'll let you believe, we cover everything, but it's all there in writing, so they can point at the contract or the SLA or the terms. So all I tell my customers is buyer beware. Make sure you know what you're signing up for and what you're not signing up for before you do it. Yep.
Yeah, and so I like OrangeScrum, and what I like, speaking of growth and limits, what I like is usually when you host it yourself, you're not limited. In other words, if I were to go to some other provider, let's use project management as an example, Jeff, this could be anything. When I cross certain thresholds, then I got to pay more money. If I cross 15 projects, I got to go up to the next tier. If I cross X number of users, right? If you're hosting it yourself, typically you don't have those restrictions, right? It's unlimited users, unlimited number of whatever. As long as the CPU and RAM and bandwidth can handle it, you can have as much as you want. So I went with OrangeScrum. I like it. They do have a store where if you want additional functionality, you can purchase that. And what I've discovered is that you pay the, let's say it's $150 for an additional module. You have that for a year, and then every subsequent year, it's 50% of that cost to maintain it moving forward, which still, no other limitations. It was a lot cheaper, and you do get some support from it. So I like OrangeScrum for project planning. We've been using it. It's been working pretty well.
So I have a really stupid question, and you may not be able to answer it. I'm looking at their website, which is the link in the show notes, and under products they show cloud, and the button to click on is free cloud sign up. And
yes.
I'm just curious, because we have conversations all the time about the hidden costs of cloud hosting. How do they get away with free cloud sign up?
Yeah. So
or when does it start costing?
Yeah, and that's typically it, right? Is you can sign up. The free is almost more like a trial because it is so limited, right? So they'll give you the first tier is free for up to 3 users for up to 3 projects, right? And so on and so forth. And then you can go to any different system and see exactly that. And to me, that's just a way to try it out, to see if you like it, because not many people are going to stay in that free tier for very long, the way that I'm seeing a lot of these projects structured. So when I went to ticketing, it was the same thing. So I like to think of project planning as like, we've got projects, we need to accomplish tasks. They're not problems associated with anything, but we need to manage our projects. Any security team, right? You're going to have stuff you need to respond to that's a problem that you need to fix, and you're going to have stuff that you're planning for and you're making progress on projects. So we're using now OrangeScrum to deal with our projects, and we've adopted Mantis bug tracker as our ticketing system. Because again, in terms of ticketing systems, I didn't see a lot of differences in the ticketing systems. I mean, the features are pretty, the features that I required anyway were pretty basic. And even when you compare project management and or ticketing, the differences between all of them are functionality-wise are pretty minimal, Jeff.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it wasn't until you described Mantis bug tracker that it occurred to me it was a ticketing system.
Yes, yes.
It just didn't jump. It didn't jump out at me.
There's a handful. In fact, some of them have gone closed source or commercial in the meantime, and that's a trend and something that is working against you. Adopting open source doesn't mean it's open source forever. And I have seen security solutions and not security solutions make that transition. Always a risk, but with ticketing systems, there are a few that are still very much open source. Right. I evaluated. There was one, PRTG, which runs on Windows, not a Linux product. There was also OS Ticket, which is free. And a lot of these also have the cloud components to it, or you can do the open source yourself. And so I did Mantis Bug Tracker myself. Now, the configuration was a little more complicated than OrangeScrum, and so you've got that aspect of it too. So far, so good. I mean, we've only been testing it for about a day, maybe a day or two. But so far, we're like, yeah, I think this could work and satisfy our requirements and allow us to track tickets, right? So hopefully soon, Security Week listeners, if you spot a problem on our website, or you spot a problem in one of our RSS feeds for our audio, or the video and audio aren't syncing on YouTube, when you discover those problems, hopefully now we'll have a system where you can submit us a ticket, and that's the goal.
So let me be very specific with ticketing systems. Again, based on my PCI experience, very often my PCI customers, where the ticketing system came up as an issue, or something that was difficult for them to use was, and this again can tie into our days at Tenable, you run a vulnerability scan on X number of systems and you find issues, and so you launch a ticket for each system, let's say, or maybe you do it for each vulnerability. What was a huge problem for a lot of my customers was identifying system owner, which isn't arguably that's not necessarily the problem of the ticketing mechanism itself, but also in terms of, let's say you did assign an owner, how do you feed back the ticketing system? How do you give it input, and especially from a PCI perspective, how do you prove that something's been fixed? Is there a way to upload, input evidence, artifacts that provides the evidence that a problem has been solved, beyond necessarily just the here's a problem, it's been assigned to so and so, they have a due date or a suspense date of a day from now, an hour from now, a week from now, and what's the progress on it? More of like the Gantt chart type of sort of process. And I haven't looked at it. Obviously, I haven't looked at this ticketing system, but our ticketing systems that say that they're bug trackers, which to me makes me immediately think of bug crowd and bug bounty. Are ticketing systems like this able to handle sort of the tracking, the ownership identification, tracking the ownership, pinging the owner if he hasn't done what he was supposed to do at a particular time? Is that what this type of solution? There, I'm using that word again.
Yeah, typically
is that what they're doing?
Sure, typically they do in various forms. I think for our requirements, that wasn't a huge deal for us. It's more just a tracking thing, right? But you don't like to think, well, the problem's been solved when the ticket's closed, right? There is a resolution component, and a lot of these systems do have a knowledge base that will integrate with the ticketing system. In other words, I've been troubleshooting a problem, I found a solution, okay, it's closed, but now the knowledge that I gained from that ticket becomes a knowledge base article, right? Where now I can go search that first when I take in calls, and that's how a lot of the systems work.
Gotcha. I was trying to make this more applicable to the enterprise audience.
Yes. And for documentation, I hate Google Drive, and I've talked about that on the show before because shit gets lost in there like there's no tomorrow. I chose MediaWiki. It was really easy for me to stand up, completely free. I looked at a lot of documentation, collaboration type systems. I'm like, you know what? The entire team knows how to use MediaWiki. It knows how to use a wiki, and we've been off to the races with that. Now, I will say, in those first three, project planning, ticketing, documentation, you could probably go to Atlassian and get solutions that would handle all of that with Jira and Confluence and those types of systems. Many enterprises, Jeff speaking, keeping it to enterprises, will choose that as an enterprise solution. There's obviously a big cost associated with that, and I wanted to hack the system, right, and try and do it as cheaply as possible and maintain as much of that functionality that met my requirements as possible, and make that specific to security teams. So this is something you might do internally in your security team, or you might use something like Atlassian, and that's cool too. Some of the other projects that in software we've adopted, I think Zabbix is pretty great so far. And this it loosely relates to collaboration, but one of the pieces you're going to collaborate on, if you're running a security team, IT operations, whatever, is if something is broken, what tells us that it's broken? And when there is a problem, where do I go to look to see for any indicators that there are a problem? Those could be security problems. Those could be operational problems. We're implementing Zabbix. We like it so far. If people have other suggestions, it is open source and free. Great community around it we found so far. This is doing things like monitoring CPU temperature on our systems, right? To make sure that if there is a problem, we can go back, or we can look at the temperature, ideally, before there is a problem, fix that before it causes an issue in production. And so this is a way that we collaborate as we all share the dashboards and agree on a process for it. So I thought more on Zabbix will be coming up. We're going to do some technical segments on it. You're
touching on something though that I almost brought up earlier. In terms of monitoring, I run into this all the time. When we talk about security monitoring, we're talking about very specific activities. Ordinarily, whether it's unauthorized logins or logins at weird times, or files are moving around or changing, things that are covered by, and again, this is sort of in a PCI context, in terms of file integrity monitoring, or what is the admin doing? What are all the admin activities? That's a PCI requirement. A lot of the monitoring tools that a lot of companies use are primarily intended for keeping things up and running, not necessarily intended for security activities or security events, and very often those are extensions or add-ons. And I try to be creative and, look at the sort of the monitoring health tools, network health tools, and try to, squint and see if we can make it work for the security requirements that I'm, putting the customer through. So when I looked at Zabbix and their website, they have a page that shows that they monitor anything. Network, server, cloud, application, services. Again, do they cover endpoints? Do they cover point of sale systems? Or do they go beyond what everything that they describe here is what I would typically describe as network? And things are changing, technologies are changing. What is a network these days? How well does this grow? How well does this adapt? Do they really monitor anything, or you'll let us know if you use it?
Pretty close. I mean, there are I forget what it calls. It's like agentless or like completely hands-off monitoring, right? Where they can just go like connect to a website, and if you don't get the response that you've programmed in, then you can throw an alert. So they do have some stuff like that. It's not as good as some other monitoring systems in terms of it doesn't have any type of trust relationship to the system. It's just monitoring it. So they do have some of that functionality. Now, when they do have an agent, and their agent, I've myself and intern Matt have successfully gotten that to run on Mac, Windows, Linux, and ARM-based Raspberry Pis as well. So they do have a Raspberry Pi agent, which not often is that included because it's not an Intel-based processor. It is ARM, which means you gotta compile special for that. So I do have an agent running on those systems. It is good. I don't know how far back their Windows or Linux support goes. Fortunately, we've adopted the latest version, and it's been good so far. They also, as we were doing a network upgrade here at Security Weekly as well, I want to be able to monitor things for SNMP maybe as well, right? So that's another monitoring point. So I mean, when I was working at the university, we used a lot of different monitoring products, right? A lot of those were still available today. I read the websites, and we just agreed that we'd go down the road of Zabbix. Nagios still out there as an option. It's what we used to use. I liked the Zabbix better. Also, like BSD-based firewalls have a package for Zabbix monitoring. So that's where, when they say network monitoring, Jeff, what I'm hoping is that we use a BSD-based firewall that has a Zabbix package. We've got that connected. I can also pull some bandwidth utilization stats to get my network stats from that. They've got some other projects that's extensible in a store. Not a store, but a community where people have written their own kind of detects, if you will, or scripts that allow you to pull specific information. The one for CPU monitoring was in that realm as well. So like I said, there's a community around it, and I'm liking it. I would also, to address your previous comments about, what's security monitor, I look at everything that monitors something as applicable to security, right? I think it's a data point that you could potentially pull in. Now, you've got to be careful how many data points you have, but if I'm researching an event and I say, well, what was this system doing? Like, oh, that system had a high CPU utilization at the time that this other event happened, and oh, by the way, it was malware, and it was ransomware, and the high CPU was because it was trying to encrypt everything on the disk. Those are all indicators that I can pull in. So I look at monitoring solutions as a great source of data that could be applied to security. Obviously, you have to filter it because you can't look at
I agree with that. But again, I think you and I and our community sees the world a little bit differently. And we're sort of trained to, work with what we're dealt. We'll take what we get. And I guess, again, this goes back to sort of, again, if we're going to have a theme, or if I'm forcing a theme, it's make sure you're defining your terms. If we use the term monitoring, network monitoring, you and I immediately think of one thing. We go in one direction. A lot of IT people, a lot of people that are, their job, their bonus, their performance is based on keeping an application running, keeping the business going. They're monitoring their motivation, why they're looking at it might be the same set of data, is completely different then why we're looking at the data, and what
Yep.
we're getting out of the data is different from what they're getting out of the data. And I'm saying this because I'm living this right now with my current customer,
Hmm.
and I'm struggling with teaching them to expand their viewpoint, to get them to think about things beyond what they're accustomed to thinking about, because they need to, not just because they're required to, because they have a PCI requirement, but because security just isn't in their wheelhouse, which is normal. But it's not even on their radar screen.
Yeah.
They're just strictly focused on performance, keeping things up and running.
Right. But that to me is valuable security data. And I think it's the trend I want to see is security and operations coming together. And one of the reasons I want to do some of these projects, not because we need them operationally, that's one reason, but the other reason is it's good security telemetry. And how do I use and look at that from a different perspective, and not just say, well, if I want to be secure, I have to go get some type of security solution, whether that's open source, free, or commercial. That's not true. A lot of other things that when you say network monitoring, right? Are you're going to monitor the switch? You're going to monitor the router, the firewall, the host has information about network. So it's more comprehensive. And I think the collaboration in this area is really good.
Well, and it's collaboration. I totally agree with you. It's collaboration. It's getting people to see things differently. Think about the problem differently. Think about a different problem, because a lot of times all the information they need is there. They don't need to go out and buy a point solution. They don't need to go out and buy something that's labeled a security product or a security solution.
Yeah.
If they can simply be trained to take what they have and look at it from a different perspective. And that's what I'm struggling with right now, is how to make that happen, how to light that fire, that spark within people that are completely conditioned to look at things a certain way, to say, no, there's a different way out there. There's a different way of looking at this data. I mean, I don't have the answer to that yet. To me, it's why I like being back in consulting, because to me it's a puzzle to solve. There's a solution out there. I'm going to keep trying until I figure out how to get them where I want them to be, or go down trying.
Yeah, and I think you and I probably share this, and many that have done security for a long time. There was in many organizations, there wasn't a strict security team. If there was, maybe it was focused on audit or compliance or policy. It wasn't necessarily operational. If you were operational in security, likely 20 years ago, and there are exceptions, but the majority, like I worked in the systems administration group. I worked in the network operations group. I was the security person. And therefore, I didn't have a huge budget to go out and buy security solutions. So I would go to the network team and I'd be like, so how do I get some information from the network infrastructure that might be helpful to me? And so you've used what is available to you. And I think we need to get back to that. Just really quick, Jeff, the last couple tools here. I like using Feedly to share news articles and stories. I think that if you're on an enterprise security team today, you likely sit around the water cooler in meetings and say, hey, did you see this new attack? Did you see this new breach? Did you see this new attack technique or tool? Did you see this new defensive tool, right? Using Feedly allows you to share that within your team. I really like it. I hope to formalize it a little better for the host so that we can share articles for our shows in a little more collaborative format. I like it as a tool for sharing that. You can have not just specific articles that you share, but also I can subscribe to a bunch of feeds, and then all of us can see the result of those feeds. So you can share that stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly on the receiving end these days. We've been using Feedly for 2-3 months now.
Yep.
And so I'm curious. You said you subscribe to feeds. I assume that there's probably some configuration screen where you go in and select categories or topic or subjects or keywords or tags or something like that. It remains to be seen how tailorable it is, and ideally, as a sort of an end user, as it were, do I have the ability at some point to customize what I'm seeing, or am I only going to get what you think I should be seeing?
Yeah, so there is individual feeds and then team feeds and team boards and personal. So everything that you do when you subscribe to feeds or you flag articles, individual articles,
right?
You can create a set just for you, or you can create sets that are shared by the team. So, and the team feature is paid,
right?
So it's not necessarily free, but it's pretty low cost, and you can start using it just for yourself for free. It's got an email digest. So I've been using RSS feed readers even before we started doing this show over 14 years ago, and I have transitioned to Feedly to give you any indication as to how much I actually like it, and we just need to explore those collaboration features a little more, and it'll be even better. Slack, of course, is the last thing, Jeff. I mean, it's pretty much the go-to, right? Back in the day, right, we had RSS and not RSS. I'm sorry, IRC, and then Jabber was the more secure IRC, but that turned out had some vulnerabilities too. Now we've got Slack, and I think probably most security teams are using Slack in some.
Well, you brought up Slack, so I have to ask, what do you think of the new logo?
Did they get a new logo?
You don't even know about the new logo?
Don't even know about the new logo.
Well, they pushed out a new logo, and I'll tell you in the Slack channel what people are saying about it. How's that?
Gotcha. Okay, so what else did I want to? I had some closing thought, and now I can't. Oh, I think another great collaboration tool that I like using too is Signal, and creating a group, text message group in Signal is a good way to communicate securely as well. Okay, the links to everything that I mentioned, OrangeScrum, Mantis, MediaWiki, Zabbix, and everything else is in the show notes, wiki.securityweekly.com. This is episode 123. Thank you, Jeff, for filling in this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.